This call is now being recorded.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Can you hear my voice? Today we'll discuss some server hardening techniques here. Tips. Hardening is nothing but enhancing, how to enhance your servers. Okay. So first one, VAPT. Vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. VAPT stands for vulnerability assessment and penetration testing here. So we have so many softwares for that. In VAPT, one is Nessus, Nexpose, GFI, LANguard. So some of tools already we discussed. LANguard, OpenVAS, Web Inspect, and NetSpace. So many tools are there if you want to secure a server or network. So do VAPT, that is vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, regularly. So you can do it manually. You can do it with these automated tools. Okay, so what kind of automated tools are there? One is a Nessus. Next one is an Nexpose, and GIF LANguard, OpenVAS, Web Inspect, NetSpace. Okay, so with this type of vulnerability scanners, we need to check what kind of vulnerabilities are there in your server. With this type of vulnerability scanners, we need to check what kind of vulnerabilities are there in your server, and you can patch it. So with automatic scanners, you can do it. So next thing, most important, install a firewall. So these are the concepts you will be learning in third unit, firewall. So what is the use of firewall here? You can install any web application firewall or any normal firewall. So firewall is acting as a gatekeeper. It generally monitors all incoming and outgoing connections, not only connections, packets. It monitors all incoming and outgoing connections as well as the packets. If packet is suspected something, it will stop. Generally, the firewall closes unnecessary open ports here. So install the firewall in your computers. So third one, update antiviruses. Update antiviruses. So you should have updated antivirus. So there are some bunch of antiviruses are available in the market. You don't trust all the antiviruses generally. We don't trust the all antiviruses. You just open a website called AV. Just open your browsers. AV hyphen comparatives. Comparatives.org. AV. Just open a website, AV comparatives.org. You can find some antiviruses. You can just check it. You can find some antiviruses. Just check the antiviruses. As of now, we can use the big defenders, K7, Kaspersky. Somewhat ours are performing good. So if you click on any antivirus, you can see you can check how they are working. Check the lab test. You can see the lab test results. Check the test results. Check the test methods, test charts in these websites. Choose any antivirus. Okay. And one more thing, don't install antivirus which are coming from the pop-up. Don't install antivirus which are coming from the pop-up. Why? Because those are most dangerous. There are n number of fake antiviruses are in the market. So don't believe such type of nonsenses pop-ups here. Okay. So you can check each and every antivirus in this website called as a av-comparatives.org. Okay. Next one. Multiple backups. Multiple backups. Multiple backups. You should have your data in multiple backups. Why? Because if some locations are disturbed, locations of your drive are disturbing, other locations or data will be helpful here. So you need to maintain multiple backups here. Next, offline backup. Offline backups. So you need to maintain an external hard disk. Example, offline backups. Not only in your PC, not in your computer. You need to maintain an external hard disk. Because why? Because if there is any ransomware, which is 0-day exploit, you can say 0-day attacks or 0-day exploit itself happens sometimes. Almost all backups will be spoiled. If there is any ransomware, or we can say which is a 0-day exploit or attack itself, sometimes almost all backups will be spoiled. So maintain the offline backups. At that time, you can offline backup will help you so much. Okay. Next, data encryption. Data encryption. So there is software for data encryption called as a BitLocker. There is software called as a BitLocker. Use BitLocker software to encrypt the hard disk data or any pen drive data, whatever it may be. If you encrypt your data, it is not much easy to retrieve the data without a key. So BitLocker is a software to encrypt your hard disk data or pen drive data or any external device data. If you want to retrieve means we need some key here. So different types of tools are there for data encryption, but BitLocker is one of the most powerful encryption softwares here. If you want to see such type of softwares, we have website, go to website called Prism. Prism break.org. Prism break.org. So this one, Prism break.org. So you can see a number of softwares for data encryption. Website name is prismbreak.org. It can suggest many tools for Android, iOS, Mac, Windows. Okay. So next one. No admin account, no admin accounts generally. So generally use guest accounts or user accounts for unknown people. Or if you know, and for known people also, you give them only the guest accounts or user accounts. Because if you give the admin accounts, they can do the any nonsense activities here. Next. bias passwords. So there are a number of softwares are there to break your operating system software. There are a number of softwares to break your operating systems, but bias password will help you to some extent here. Okay, bias passwords also can reset by removing CMOS batteries. Bias passwords can also be reset by removing CMOS batteries. Small Jupyter settings change. So some extent it will be secure. Okay. So these are some of the server hardening enhancing techniques or tips to maintain your server very secure. Okay. So for this purpose, you want to follow these rules here, compulsory. And you can do this VAPET, vulnerability assessment and penetration testing regularly. Okay. Now, what next? So we are explained previous classes one tool called as a autopsy. Have you remember? Autopsy. So what is the autopsy? So you can extract any data. You can extract the data with the help of this autopsy here. Let me open. Its cost is $450 in general time, but it is now free of cost. You can install now. You can install in your computers. Okay. Select new case. So you can give any name for the case. Okay. And next. So I want to browse the directory from which browser, which location directory I want to extract. Okay. Then click on next, finish. So you can select any local disk, or you can insert your pen drive. Okay. You can extract the data. So it will start scanning all deleted files and images. It will also give the log information also. Logs, LOG, logs. It's a small experiment. Try it out. You can download this autopsy in your computers. Presently, it is a free of cost. In general time, is a $450. You can install in a host computers, no problem. Okay. Tomorrow I'll tell different logs here, different types of logs like event logs, network logs, web server logs, database logs, transaction logs, and where these logs can be found out. Okay. And we'll also discuss volatility foundation. Already we discussed. We'll show in practical in next coming classes. And we'll discuss some of the more tools. So in previous class, we discussed some of the concepts in risk management. Okay. So what is the risk identification? What are the components of risk identification? It may be people, it may be procedures, yes, data, software, and hardware, and some plans and organize the process, some periodic deliverables, reviews, presentations to the management, and what are the components of risk identifications, and what are the components of information security, how we characterize them. It may be people, if it is a people, employees and non-employees. All this stuff we have discussed in previous classes. And people, procedures, and data identifications, hardware, software, network asset identifications, data classification and management, up to clean disk policy we discussed. Now we'll discuss information asset classifications here. Okay. So many organizations have data classification schemes here. Yes, data classification schemes. One is, example, you can take confidentiality. Confidentiality. So what is a confidentiality again? Anyone, please chat in chat box. What is confidentiality? Most secrecy, a secret, most sensitive information. Sensitive information is nothing but a confidentiality. Next, internal. What is this internal? Use it for internal information. Internal information. Internal information. Example, we can take yes, authorized contractors, organizations, or any other third party. Third parties, you can also say. Other third parties. Okay. External. This information is approved by the management. External is nothing but information is approved by the management for public release generally. So classification of components must be specific to allow determination of priority levels. So which is first, which is second. So according to priority levels, we are classifying the data. So categories must be comprehensive and mutually exclusive. That is, information organizations may have to organize themselves to create usable data classification models. Okay. Next, information asset valuation here. So each asset, each asset of organization is assigned to its category generally. This question help to develop the asset valuation generally. Which information asset is the most critical to organization success? Is most critical to the organization success here. And second one, generates the most revenue and profitability. Which information asset generates the most revenue and profitability? And which information asset would be a most expensive to replace or protect tokens? And which information asset would be most embarrassing or cause greatest liability if revealed here? So you want to characterize this. As each asset of organization is assigned of its own categories here. Yes. So in order to finalize this step of information asset identification process, each organization create a weighting based on answers to previous questions here. So calculate relative importance. Calculate the relative importance of each asset using weighted factor analysis here. So for that purpose, list the assets in order of importance. List the assets in order of importance here. Okay. So this can be achieved by the weighted factor analysis worksheet. So organizations maintain the weighted factor analysis worksheet here. Like this. So which is confidential if you're doing the data classification, impact of profitability, information assets. So when the data is evaluated, who is evaluated this data? So these are some sample examples of worksheet here. So which is confidential, which is private, and impact to profitability, which is high, which is medium, which is critical. Like that, according to the priority, according to the weighted process. They are doing the documentation here. So creating weighting process, weighting for each category based on answers to questions. List the assets in order to importance using weighted factor analysis worksheet. Calculate relative importance of each asset using the weighted factor analysis. So these are some examples given in a textbook. Weighted factor for analysis worksheet. SSL, secure socket layers, and EDI, electronic data interchange. SSL is a protocol. So for that purpose, you want to identify and prioritize the threats here, threat identification. So wide variety of threats can face an organization here and its information and information systems. So wide variety of threats face an organization and its information and information systems. So generally realistic threats need investigations here, which are real threats, need some investigations. So investigations can be done by any techniques. Forensics helps in investigations. Okay. Unimportant threats are set aside, you can say. So threat assessments generally, which threats present danger to assets. You want to understand that. The most dangerous threats for your organization. You want to identify. You want to do assessment. You need some controls to find out that present danger or present threats to your assets. Asset is nothing but it may be people, it may be hardware, it may be software, it may be procedure, it may be data. Which threats represent the most danger to the information? What we process? How much would it cost to recover from the attack? You want to do some analysis. You want to identify, you want to prioritize the threats first of all, and you want to do some analysis to recover from that attack. So you want to give the cost. What are the controls needed for the organization to recover from that attacks and to maintain these controls for longer period? Which threats require greatest expenditure to prevent? Which threats require greatest expenditure? So more controls, whether you can buy from the vendors or you can buy from the suppliers or third party. So you want to find out the cost. You want to find out the expenditure to prevent those type of threats here. So these are threats to the information security already discussed in the first chapter. Compromise to intellectual property, it may be a privacy, copyright, trespass, espionage, unauthorized access, data collection. Examples we discussed. Force of nature, fire, flood, earthquake, lightning, human error, failure, accidents, employees, mistakes, information extortion, blackmail, disclosure of information, missing, inadequate, incomplete controls. Generally examples, software controls, physical security. Like that we discuss so many things, quality of service, deviations from service providers, quality of service issues generally, sabotage or vandalism, destruction of systems or informations, software attacks, viruses, worms, denial of service attacks generally, technical hardware failures or errors, bugs, code problems, unknown loopholes, technological obsolescence, outdated technologies, theft, illegal confiscation of property. So these threats we discussed in the previous classes, first class, first unit. Most important. So you want to identify these threats for your organization. So vulnerability identifications. So once you have identified organization's information assets, once you identify organization information assets and documented some criteria for beginning to access the threats it faces here. Once you identified organization's information assets and documented, there's some criteria for beginning to access the threat it faces here. So you can then review each information asset for each threat it faces here. Then you can review the each information asset for each threat here it faces and create its list of vulnerabilities. Review the each information asset for each threat it faces and create its list of vulnerabilities here. So what are vulnerabilities generally? What is the vulnerabilities? They are specific avenues threat agents, you can say. They are specific avenue threat agents. Specific avenue threat agents which can exploit to attack information assets. Which can exploit to attack information assets are called as the vulnerabilities here. So you need to examine how each threat could be perpetrated and list of organizations assets and vulnerabilities here. List of organization assets and vulnerabilities. So you want to examine each and every asset here and vulnerabilities of your organizations. So for this process works best when people diverse the backgrounds within the organizations. Good background work. You can keep some brainstorming sessions. How to control your threats. How to control your threats here. Some brainstorming sessions. Awareness programs to organization people. So how to avoid this type of threats, control this type of threats for your organizations, avoid this type of vulnerabilities. Some brainstorming sessions may be conducted. At the end of risk identification process, list of assets and their vulnerabilities is achieved. Okay. So you want to find the vulnerabilities here. Okay. Risk assessment. What is risk assessment? If you identify the risk, so next process is the risk assessment. So we can determine the relative risk here for each vulnerabilities here. We can determine relative risk for each vulnerabilities through a process, through a particular process is called as a risk assessment. We can determine a relative risk for each of the vulnerabilities through a particular process is called as a risk assessment. So after identification of the risk, next process is the risk assessment. You want to evaluate the relative risk for each vulnerabilities here through some process is called as a risk assessment. So generally risk assessment assigns a risk rate, a score for each information assets. Risk assessment generally assigns a risk rate, a score for each information asset here. So goal is to create a method for evaluating relative risk for each listed vulnerabilities here. So one is likelihood, is a probability that specific vulnerability will be the object of successful attack generally attacked. So you can assign some numeric values between 0.1 low and 1.0 as a high, or between 1 to 100. 0 means not used since vulnerabilities with 0 likelihood are removed from the asset or vulnerability list, you can see. So you can use some selected rating model consistently, or you can use some external references for values that have been reviewed or adjusted for your circumstances. Example for likelihood. So likelihood is generally given for email which contains some viruses or worms, has been researched. So number of network attacks can be forecast based on how many network address organizations are assigned. Number of network attacks can be forecast based on how many number of network addresses of organization has been assigned. So you can give some rating here. Assign some numeric values. It may be from 0 to 0.1 to 1.0, low to high, or give the number between 1 to 100. So 0 means less vulnerabilities, no vulnerabilities you can say. And 1.0 is a high vulnerabilities, 1 to 100. So there's some formula for this risk determination for the purpose of relative risk assessment. So likelihood into value of information assets minus percent of risk already controlled plus uncertainty, you can say, plus uncertainty. That is nothing but risk equal to likelihood of vulnerability occurrence time values minus percentage risk already controlled plus an element of uncertainty. So first of all, for finding risk determination, you want to find the likelihood into value of information assets here minus percent of risk already controlled plus uncertainty. So there's some formula you can find out in your textbook. You can work on it. This example. Now some examples given in test for risk determination. Next, identify the possible controls here. You want to identify the possible controls. for each threat and their associated vulnerabilities that have some risk, or create some preliminary list of control ideas. So residual risk is a risk that it remains to information asset even after existing controls have been applied. So how every organization maintains some controls that controls not may affect, not may more effective for this type, some type of this residual risk, you can see. Even though you apply some existing controls, this threats, this risk may be remain for information asset. So there are three general categories of controls. One is the policies, most important, policies, program, technologies. Policies, programs, and technologies. Okay. So what is the policies? Policies are documented documents generally that specify organization's approach to the security. So every organization maintains some policies here. Policies are documents that specify organization's approach to the security. So there are four types of policies generally. I'll check out once again. There are four types of policies. Okay. First one, general security policy. Today we'll discuss up to only policies. Okay, next programs and technologies. Today we'll discuss only policies. General security policies. Next one, program security policy. Third one, issue security policy. And last one is systems security policy. So what is general security policies? So these are some, you can say, these are from executive level documents. You can say executive level documents. Maybe from champions, executive level documents. It may be some team members. It may be some upper management people. Executive level document. That outlines organization approach and which approach the organization's approach. You can say outlines the organization approach towards the information security. So this document generally created by CIO. What is the full form of CIO? Anyone please chat in chat box. In first classes, we discuss all these things. CIO, Chief Information Officer. Okay. Next one. Program security policies. So what is program security policies? Planning document for process. Planning document for process of implementing security in organizations. Planning document for process of implementing security in organizations. Example, blueprint. What is a blueprint? It may be some analysis part, maybe there. Some designs. A blueprint includes all things, design and implementation of security. Next, issue specific policies. So these issue specific policies addresses some specific implementations. Some detailed instructions, some private detailed instructions, restrictions which are associated with some security issues. Okay, example, we can take policies again, policies of internet. Example, I'm saying use of mail, use of emails. Issue specific policies address some specific implementations, some detailed instructions. You can say they're giving some restrictions for security issues here. Next, last one for today, and system specific policies. System specific policies addresses particular use of certain systems, use of certain systems, you can say. So you can include example, some firewall configurations, firewall configurations, firewall configurations, configuration policies. You can take policies. Yes, system access places. System access policies, sorry. The other technical configuration policies you can take. Okay. So we'll discuss some of the programs and technologies in next class. So if you want to become the information security certified trainer, okay, you want to understand these policies of your organization, compulsory.